sometimes just think about the economics will influence on schools and maybe less fun, and then sometimes and demographic is certainly drops, and then how can you do that? So I grew up the rural area in Korea, and then when I was in elementary school, it's like one class. Every year had one class, and around 50 people, 40 to 60 people, but my class is 50 people, and my niece, my nephew was in school, and at the time, the demographic changed a lot, and because people left the village, and then at the time, each class is like 3 people and 5 people. So eventually, the school is closed down. No more, and then maybe just buildings kind of getting older and older. Nobody was taking care of the buildings, kind of collapsing. And there's can we keep the school while we still can run those close down the schools, like one of the demographic change and economy change and as a government policy changing, and depends on a lot of factors, and then we gotta change. That's the basic demands, and then change is what the alters behavior or behavior specific behavior and structure, and then depends on the vision and what's the goals, and you have to structure the school, but sometimes we gotta the structures are changing and procedures of maybe regulations and then maybe purpose or outputs of some unit within the organization. That's the change to alter. Whether it may be small changes, it may be big changes. It alter existing behavior, structure, and procedures, and then proposal outputs. That's a changes. But how can we make a change? And there's 4-step models, and then Caldwell suggests 4-step models, and then he said. Here is identification and priority making needs, ranking of needs, that's the first step. And you gotta know what's the problem and to change, and what's the priority in the whole operation. And then development of broad strategy and specific plan, and then you gotta make planning, how can you develop, and then implementation of a selected approach, and you can include and you can run the new ways, and then assessment of outcomes. That's the called as 4-step models, and then there is 5-step calls and 5-step models, and awareness, awareness and problem and interest, and how is relate to others, and what about evaluation. And we gotta try, and then adoption completely. That is another 5-step models, and then a lot of it try to make better. Try to make a better way to change, and then model is out there, and then here's another model. This was reoccurring cycle models and peppers and Slantic, right? And then change takes place as a consequence of the influence of new situations and environmental factors encountered during the pursuit of organizational goal. It's not just the change is linear. You cannot have like a 5-step and 4-step, 3-step, whatever, and then he said it. So a little bit different perspective, and then consequence influence of new situation and environment factors encounter, right? That is the reoccurring models and basic principles. And then, so change is really primary means what? By which an organizational system remains fit or healthy and what? Able to cope with new and different demands. So a lot of people, they really scared of change because a lot of reasons we can see later. So change is not a kind of a scary one, but still, as a society changing, as a culture is changing, and if you want to survive, you gotta change it. And I went to Korea 5 years ago, and then I went back, and then do you know the street is all completely changed? Maybe 10 years ago, and then I was really surprised. And maybe I came over here, and then 10 years later, I visited Korea, and then they changed everything. And then when I was in college in Korea, and there was bookstores and coffee shops, and a lot of things is gone. All is gone. What about here? How many businesses are closing down? And then because of the online shoppings, Amazons and other shoppings, online shopping, and people they don't have to go to a store anymore. It's very convenient, even though they pay. Sometimes it's competition is so high and price is very reasonable. It's keep changing. How can you fit into the society? Society changing. How can you stay healthy? Sometimes, if you are really used to it, and then there's no change, and kind of stagnant there, and then there's no movement, inspiration, and then organization cannot be healthy. So so we gotta adjust, and we gotta survive, and we gotta stay healthy, right? And we gotta cope with different challenges, and that's why we gotta change this. There is types of changes. What kind of types of changes? And enforced changes. So we can see the enforced kind of the result of the need identified from external forces. Think about we got a result, and our goal is this one, and then we are really underachieved our goal, and then maybe from the top and maybe outside and force them to change. So the enforced change functions at the whims of those who more authority, influence, and political clout. Okay, recruit them, and you gotta do it. You gotta change it from outside. And so this is enforced change is a state or federal mandate, or the impact of the community pressure group. It's from the outside. And maybe think about education is kind of performance going down, and a state gonna evaluate, and federal gonna kind of overseas, and then suppose we're gonna change it for better education. That is a enforced change. What about expedient changes? This also involves what? Meeting immediate concern and generally short-term and reactionaries. This expedient change is like a last-minute change in the school budget, or kind of think about storm damages to the school building, and you gotta do something, and then you gotta change. Sometimes you don't have a choice much, and but sometimes you go quickly, you gotta do it. Not the, kind of temporary, right? That is change. What about essential change? Essential change is from the what? Internal rather than the external resources. What about, and it's really essential for the school, to operate in schools, and we gotta change them. That's essential to survive. And so essential change is driven by the ability of the system monitor itself and work toward improved performance. So how can we improve? How can we make it better like this, right? And so, for example, it's essential is what is usually is what about curriculums, and then we are doing the special programs, and then what's the curriculum is what's really effective for student learning, right? It's really effective for teachers teaching, right? So that is like updating curriculums. Maybe every year, every 3 years, you're gonna review the whole curriculum with the teachers. Maybe you have a certain special project, and then we gotta evaluate. But a planned change. Planned change is a deliberate attempt to direct the change with a set of the predetermined goals and values. There is a planned changes which relate to the goals and values, right? It's not just activities and programs. So maybe we already learning about the strategic planning formation, the last class, and then that will be it's already thorough plan, and we're gonna analyze, right, and change it. After that we can change it. What an unplanned change? Oh, interesting. Unplanned change. Unplanned change is like enforced change, unanticipated or rules of the school system or the organization. No, there's no options. We gotta change. So generally it's from the outside, not from the inside. And sometimes, like I already told you, there is school, there is no more demographic change, and population is kind of a decrease dramatically, and then maybe they can, get merged to the maybe school in the downtown or in the city like that, right? Here is the merge of two small functional school districts that result from the body needs of the state rather than the any dysfunctional in local district. And it's not a dysfunctional, but because it depends on the situation, right? There's a lot of examples. So unplanned change. And there is this people usually depends on what kind of people you have, and sometimes people will resistant to resisting to changes. It depends on the personality, and I like to really challenge something new. And but some people really they want to stay what they have safely, and they don't want to interrupted by the other things. Maybe you have to go for new things and do different things and reestablish all things. Maybe that's why. But I'm really my personality is really different, and then I don't want to be stagnant. And this is good enough, and then let's enjoy here. Not like a style. It's not my style. Even though we are very creative and productive, and can we think about much better way to beneficial to others? Always, and small adults, but I don't push a lot, but still think about and suggest like this in my ministries, and try to be creative and try to kind of align with the changes of outside changes. And then, but why people are really resistant to change? People are really surprised and they are very fear of the unknown. I know we wanna try to make it better, and then we don't know what is coming out. So unknown. That's why people are really resist to change. And what about another reasons? Climate mistrust, and new principal came, and then in the beginning, and then he gave a lot of expectation to the people because he promised a lot of different things, and he has a pretty good background. But once times goes by, and then kind of the teachers and then other staff cannot trust the principals, and then one day principal suggests something, and what happened? We don't trust him. That's mistrust. Why? And sometimes people change is not a barrier, but try to different things. But if you are really secure and safe what you are doing, and then people are really fearful of failure. That's why they don't want to change. And nowadays, I heard that young generations and kind of postponed their marriage because I read an article, and then one of the reasons that they don't wanna fail in their marriage. That's why people are kind of avoiding marriage and postpone it, and that's the fear of failure. And sometimes loss of status or jobs. There is changes, and then no jobs, and then maybe right now, and because economy is down here, economics are on the downhill, and there's a lot of layoffs there. They planned this year, like that. And sometimes peer pressure. I want to change, but look at this. They don't want to change, and then there's a prejudice there, and then I don't want to change like this. And then disruption of the cultural tradition of a group relationship. What's a group thing? Right? Group identity, and if you belong to there, and then even though you don't like it, you want to change it, but what's a group directed group people will have groups, they want to change, and then that's and what about cultural tradition, and people don't want to change, and that's the one of the reasons that nowadays I am reading the people's group, unreached people group, and even though people in the same country, they have their own culture and sometimes their language, and we call the people group, and they practice their own cultures, and they were not interrupted by outside cultures. They were not keep their traditions, and they were get an identity with what they have, what they practice, right? So one of the barriers to share the gospel with them. And then what are the personality conflicts? And of course. And if you are really introvert and someone is extrovert, and there's a confliction is there. Lack of the tact or poor planning. And maybe some people really excited and without planning, without the right of the tactic and the what. And they try to present that they want to do it, and then people say, we gotta research more about that, and we're gonna think about more like this. That is a kind of a resistance, because of that, and people are resistant over there to the change. Let me see. Here is Schuler. She has a really different perspective about why people are resistant to the change. People are resistant to the change, and then there is some reasons there. She said the risk of the change is seen or greater than the risk of the status quo. It's dangerous. That's why, okay, staying with the status quo is better than change, right? They think that people feel loyal to others who are identified the old way. That's betrayal. So they don't want to change it. That's true, right? Especially in collective societies, maybe it's against to the traditions like that, and then role models for the new way, do not yet exist. Okay, there is no any pilot studies, and there is no any other schools doing, and that's why it's hard, too risky. Maybe they think that people perceive their own incompetence under the new way and fear it. Sometimes think about all the generations, like, oh, we gotta change it, but it's hard to change it because we are really behind the technologies. And sometimes my wife is kind of really behind, and then she doesn't know. And I know she tried to Google it and find out, but sometimes it's really scared of it. What if okay, and what happened? Like this, and then her phone memory is really small, and then I subscribed to iCloud for her, and then up to 6 people could share the as a storage, and then nowadays, and then she asked one day, and then she had a keep kind of a sign coming out, and then do not transfer your picture to the iCloud. So I never used that kind of stuff, and then I don't know. Can you ask one of the daughter, Katie, because maybe they know. And then she asked my younger one, and then she said, I don't know, I don't use it. And then okay, I could ask my older one, she's using iCloud. Like this, we are not sure, and then kind of we don't know, but still it's a new way, and we are not confident. So that's why we don't want to change it. Eventually, we gotta change, right? We need to know how to use iCloud and connect the phone, and if I transfer to the data to the iCloud, and then the backup, and then is it still I can access and take out, and but still we don't know. That's my status, and like this, and then that's why it's hard, and then people feel overloaded and overwhelmed. It's too much for us, and then no, we cannot do it like that. And then people are skeptical, and they want to show the soundness of the new approach. And oh really? I cannot buy it. Oh, I need more information like this, right? And people fear hidden agenda on the part of the reformers, and then, it's really pure motivation is there, or you have another agenda to step up, to promote yourself like this. And then, what about people see that the proposed change as threatening their self-images, it's related to personals, and as the people anticipate loss of status, least into the quality of life, and we gotta more spend on work, and like that more and more like this, right? And people honestly see that the proposed change as a bad ideas. and they end to be right. And that is the kind of people, oh, that's not right. We gotta stand, we gotta stand with the right things. That is the reason that people really resistant to the change. Think about how can we make changes. So it's really important to make a right climate to change and the culture in organizations. We don't have any kind of shared need to change. We don't have any kind of urgency to change, and then what? It's just hard to do that. So overall climate and culture of the education system will give a major impact on the ability to create lasting changes. So climate and culture is really important. People use process of change. And what is a climate? Climate is a perception of expected work behavior based on perception of expected work behavior based on existing pattern of behavior or existing organizational characteristics. That's a climate. How much I need to, what I need to do it, right? Kind of perception there. But culture is knowledge of how things ought to be, and include basic assumptions and beliefs shared by the member of the organizations. What kind of culture is that? Right? What do you think? What do you believe? And that is a really important thing before you change. So how can we change? How can we change? And there is some strategy for changes, and then here is Nicholas. He kind of summarized and then based on the chains and the bennies, and then he said that there is some principles there, and then he made four. He kind of added to the chains and bennies studies, and he said empirical and rationals, and then it's one with strategy, and then what? The underlying observation are the people are rational being. That is the rational, right? Rational and empirical and rational. People are very rational being. That's the assumption, and follow their own best interest. Follow their own best interest based on their rational when they know them. So that is a basic assumption, and selection factor include casting about on the target, targeting convert who will assist supporting the proposed changes. So there is some empirical rational changes, and then basically they know what is the rational, what is the sound, and people follow their own best interest. That's basic, understanding of the changing strategy. And there's normative, normatively re-educative, and the strategy, and this one is the underlying assumption is there. People are social beings. There's a really people are really rational being. It's a social being, and we adhere to cultural norms and values. They don't think about the regulation, and they really think about relationship, norms and values. So selection factors include the factor that change focus on cultures, because so maybe it takes time to change. It's hard to change a culture though, and maybe if you read the tipping point, and then I study about the cultural change. But it's a lot of theories out there, but still it's not easy, right? How can we transform the culture? And maybe individual is easier, but still culture meaning that what the barriers is not a the individual, but still society is a kind of product of the societies, right? And that's why it's very slow, and sometimes informal and formal structure must be considered. That is a normative, re-educative strategy for changes. What about the power coercive change? Maybe you can see the dictative countries, and then the underlying assumption is that people are compliant and with whatever they are told can be made to do. Okay, just follow the officer or follow the leaders. They don't have their own opinion. That the power coercive changes. So authority is power to do that. So selection factors, times, and series of threat. You gotta think about, and sometimes there is we have images in the stage, and then there is kind of power coercive changes kind of coming in, right? So if threat is grave and time is short, this choice is really useful. And you don't have much time and the problem is very serious, and then you gotta do it. And so in benign cultures, member will likely to accept this approach, the clear perceived threat. So members are less likely to accept this approach in the culture that are autonomous and entrepreneurs, right? And it means that if you go to think about how we responded to COVID-19, and in America it's hard to control, and because really our culture is really autonomous, right? Individualistic. It's hard to control. They don't want to restrict it by authority. But if you see the China and Korea and totally different. That's a power coercive changes. What about environmental and adaptive changes? And then the underlying assumption are that the people oppose laws and disruption or can adapt. Eventually, you will adapt and survive, based on the revolutionary theory. So change is based on the building a new organization and gradually transform people from old to the new structure. Gradually, not like another approach is really normative, re-educative, right? Approach. So takes time, right? Gradually, it's a coercive one, and so selection factors include the extent of the change, how much each time, and how can you follow little by little, and then maybe you can have a kind of divided in certain years, and first year, second year, third year, and then you can change it gradually, and then this is another issue, the availability of appropriate personality for the seeding the new organizations. That's another issue, that even though it's good and then it takes time and then really be patient, and then you gotta do little by little, and then I don't know how can you start and start from the seedling to the get a harvest. When I see that the mission kind of I have engaged in missions, and then I see a lot of different personality between Koreans and Americans. And Koreans churches and then Korean churches, and they wanna do something very quickly, and they don't kind of wait for the kind of seed and to grow and to harvest. It takes time, but not every American church, but American churches, this is scattered seed, and kind of we have to cultivate and give it water and fertilize it and grow, and then we can harvest. They wait. And then that's why when they go to mission field, they want to do something very exciting and they want to see something visible outcomes. That's the Korean churches. That's my observation. But American churches, they waiting first year and second year and third year, not every church, but they want to wait and then kind of trust the missionaries, and they want to work with them, right? That is so. I wanted to share about how we need to do, and but still, it's hard. That's the issue. If it takes time, so like mission is kind of changing people's heart and mind. It's not just a habit, want to have it, and then it takes time, right? And that's one of the examples. There is 4 types of the changes. One is kind of and right, so the empirical, rational, based on the rational human beings, rational, and then normative, re-educative, and then assume that people are social being. And what about power courses? And then really people are very compliant and follow what they heard. And what about the environmental adaptive and types? Is people really don't wanna lose, and that's why they adopt and new environment. That's the kind of theories. And there is another model, is like action research models. How can we change? And that one is basically kind of strategic. Nicholas is suggests 4 models, but here is, and then Hughes and Cumming, and then they kind of suggest the actioner research model is like a research model. First stage, you gotta identify the problem. What's the problem? Understanding the situation, and you gotta find out the problem. And second stage, and you gotta consult with someone who have that expert, right? And who had experience, and then who can consultation, and then another, and then later, or maybe if you cannot conduct the own things, and then maybe you can hire the outside researchers, and maybe you can make a committee and work together, and then collecting data, and then diagnosis, and preliminary diagnosis. You're gonna know diagnosis of people, what's going on. That is another stage. After that, and you could get some feedback from outside, from the committees and from others. And joint diagnosis of the problem. you can get a feedback and you can get a kind of feedback, and then how can you make and then diagnose the problem and then and plan to action, right? And action, and then if you implement the changes, and then what is the outcome? What is it's going well? It's not going well. What is there is an adjustment needed or not? Like this, and then data, collecting data after action plan, kind of an evaluation. There is an actional research model that Hughes and Cummings suggest for changes. Pretty reasonable though, pretty reasonable, because through the process and you gotta understand the problem, and then sometimes you know that what is the nature of the problem, right? And then you can get a feedback from outside and from inside. Here is another model, is the planned models. And planned models is there is and here is one of the model is the planned model, one is the problem solving models, and Lippert and Lancet and then the Mossop, and they suggested the models. And then first of all, if you want to solve the problem and then what, there's a plan in there. Just think about it. It's not a you gotta have something. You have a mind of the process and how there's a plan, right? And first of all, you got a diagnosis. You got a diagnosis of the problem. So problem is noticed and identified and defined in the first stage, in diagnosis stage. And then what's the alternative? What is the alternative? What is the solutions? And then there is a lot of variety of the possible solutions developed, and then what the actions necessary to go. You gotta, how can you accomplish them, and you gotta lay them out. That is the alternative solutions. You gotta see them, which is possible alternatives. And selection and implementation, and then you gotta select the best one for the problem, and then implementation. So one possible solution is selected on the basis of the what? Appropriateness and the feasibility, and then solution is applied. That is the implementation process. And then always though it's done, no. We implement a new program and you're gonna see how it's going. Always, I consider the evaluation always. Then they said maybe always after implementing new things, and they evaluate, and then you can go back to the process all the time. That is one of the planned models, problem solving models. And here is another models, and research development, diffusion, utilization model. We call the RDDUM model. RDDUM model is what? They really emphasize the rational empirical approach. Scientific methodology is really based on the rational empirical. It's kind of there is some studies out there and not proven is kind of suggested, right? The rational empirical approach is provide systematic frames for the managing planned change. It's like really based on the scientific. And then, first of all, they research about what's going on, and then leads to the discovery of a technique is validated through the pilot testing, other studies, and experimentations, and maybe there or the others, and then what modified is appropriate for the practical use. That's a research, and then they need to do, and then diffusion process was the new knowledge and product or techniques are packed appropriately, and you gotta utilize. You can use that one. And what happened? And that is you can use that one. Diffusion, and you can use that one. And what is the most applicable when there are the cooperative arrangement among the developers and users and distributors? They need to work together, and this is really it's effective. And there's a political support and leadership that encourage use of research, and then it's really useful. And the research process is not just you can just get some data and then you can publish it. There is always reliability and validity is there. And that's why. So, and research, and then you're going to diffuse on new knowledge and product techniques that is really coming out, and what, and then you're going to utilize, right? That is the research and development diffusion process. Maybe I think I research and development, and I think let me check. Maybe development is kind of missing, and that's I think the development is there, but develop research, and you gotta develop the new ideas, and then diffuse. You gotta spread out and new knowledge, and then you gotta use it, right? That's usually scientific research. I did a kind of process, and then when I research about what is the issues and what I want to know, and then research, and I have my own small theory. It's not a big theory, grand theory, and small theory, right? And then people wanna see, it's the right, they understand about some part of second generation including Americans, and then maybe they are interested, they want to see what I studied, like this, diffusion, and then utilize. There's research and development and utilization, diffusion and utilization models, and these one is the social interaction models. What is the social interaction models? This is still rational approach to change. Let's see. This is assess the social interaction model, assess the need for the change based on the communication and information from the outside the system, not from the inside and outside. And involve the members to change the system in planning and implementation. So even though they have a need from the outside and the what, and as a members of what, involve members for the change the system in planning and implementation, whole process. Social interaction models. So there is some knowledge, so element is here, and it's knowledge and persuasion and decision and confirmation. First of all, and what they need knowledge, the leaders or members of the system have information about the proposed innovations. You gotta have right understanding and knowledge. That's a social interaction models. And then what are persuasion? Members of the system are provided with information leading to the positive and negative attitude about the innovative proposal. And then can you buy it? Why? You cannot buy. Why you don't buy it? Why, right? That is a persuasion process. And what about this? The member of the system cannot accept or reject the proposed innovation. Maybe if you don't buy the people's idea, and then what? You reject it. If you buy, you accept it, and then what? And comes to decisions, right? And what is a confirmation? That there is a confirmation from the peers and the outside, what? The decision of adopted or rejected was appropriate, right? Why? There's a confirmations. There's a social interaction models. So where is really most effective and applicable? So when there's a support to establish external contact, okay, we have external, outside support, and it's really effective. And opportunity, when opportunities to gather the external information are available. It's from the outside, but we don't know what's going on outside, but we cannot have any opportunity to get data from outside. It's hard to do that. That is from the outside and mean that reflect the outside situation. Right? We gotta know that. We gotta collect data, kind of data from outside. And then when there is a fund to purchase a product, sometimes it's inside the system, and then you can know what you need, maybe you can budget it. Sometimes outside in it's out of budget, then you cannot do it. So maybe fund is available to purchase different things and to renovate, and then it's kind of similar support. And whatever, when is the desire to gain status and recognitions? So if you really want to be recognized, and if you want to really gain the status to move up, maybe this one is very important, right? And think about, and you got kind of sometimes that's one of the problems of the organization. And if you are inside, you don't know what's going on. But when you step back and come out of the organization, then you can see and you can observe a lot of things going on. The problem is that I experienced that I was really kind of an outsider, and then see the organization, and then I try to help them, but they don't recognize the problem. Recognize problem, and we are okay. And then you cannot change. Right? So linkage model is that we already reviewed the 3 models, right? And social interaction models, and then research development, diffusion utilized model, and problem solving models, and fourth one is they synthesize on previous 3. So encompasses elements of problem solving and research development, diffusion utility models, and then utilization model or social interaction models. They have hold together, link together. What is the procedure that the linkage model suggests? Here is a basic component, identification. So identification, the problem is identified, defined in communication. What is the communication? Communication channels linked with the system is outside the resources are established, not just inside and outside. Like we got a social reaction is social interaction is kind of see that the problem from the outside, and then we got to open the communication channel with to the outside, right? And communications and research, like research, art, RDDU models, and then external information skills varying on the problem, defined, sort out, and acquired. So which problem, and we're going to research about and the problem and sort out everything. And what is the solution then? Research and collect the data and analyze data, and then suggest finding something and suggest. That's maybe solution. And what's the solution? Solution is with the assistance of the external resources, not just inside. And when you do kind of research, and then we always look up to the what's the work done before, like a literature review. What people work on this kind of little problem, and what's the outcome, like this. And then that is the solution, right? And then implementation is a solution is applied to apply to renovate and change the situation, and then evaluate. So look into the process, the whole process. There's a linkage model, and maybe that is kind of one of the best models, and apply in apply for the to change it. It's the best to use. So sorry. So here is there is when you have the linkage model, and then so that there is a strong pressure for the changes in behavior can be established by the providing specific information desired by the group about itself and behavior. So more central relative meaning that is let's see something is I think it's let's say that one is I think it's messed up my PowerPoint. Maybe let's that is basically models, and then I introduced 4 models, and then think about basically when you think about when you try to change models, and there is pressure is there, and sometimes there is factor development and participating. There's a processes there. Sometimes changing from the really outside from the inside, and depends on, right? And sometimes information can really needed to change it, and then all things we gotta consider when you think about change model. This is need for the kind of linkage models, and then always we gotta know that, and pressures and how can we develop it, how can we participate, right? And we're gonna move on to the next, and then right, so who's gonna change then? Who's gonna change? And this one is like maybe change agent. Who is changing is maybe person, maybe administrator and individuals, and sometimes groups, sometimes a whole organization wants to change or produce the change in system, right? That's the kind of a change agent. So even though we are talking about education organization, schools, and then not the administrator, only not the administrator is the change agent, but also maybe school district, maybe state, maybe federal can be the agent, right? Change agent. And there is an characteristic of an effective change agent. Who is really change effective ways, and what kind of personality, what is the characteristic of the change agent? There is if they have a function like they needed to really recruit very well and think about, and one problem is there, and then people who have a really expert knowledge of that, who are really involved from the beginning, and who kind of working in the outside and say similar problem, and then that's a recruitment. And I don't know whether you guys like the sport, and then depends on your recruitment, and then that year is really a couple of years successful, like a college football and basketball, and but if you fail, then you struggle a lot, right? And that recruitment is really important, right? We gotta recruit right person who can get the right information and judge the whole situations and expert. And we gotta the agent is supposed to develop the whole process, and from the beginning to the end, and then you gotta present it very well. Sometimes, and another function is the control. How can you control whole process and whole things? Maybe you gotta balance between the people's reaction and then changes, and then but in control, it means that agent in control, and there's not much frictions and conflict. But if we are not controlled well, and then there's frictions, and sometimes kind of face a big barrier. So we gotta do better. That's why the recruitment, and then develop stage by stage, and kind of planning, and then control smoothly. That's effective agents characteristics. Then we already talked about people are really resistant to change, and then how can we reduce the changes, and then help the process, right? And how can we sorry, this is misspelling, and the factors aid reducing resistance in changing right? So S is kind of Huge proposed some idea about how can we reduce the resistance to change, and then here is some changing process needs to take into the need and attitude and belief of the people involved, as well as what the boards of organizations think about and consider their need, their attitude and their belief, right? And so whole the process, and you feel like you are considered, and then you are really in mind why we try to innovate and change, and then people can really maybe cooperative, not strongly, but the resistant to the change, right? So we gotta show we gotta consider your benefit, for your benefit, right? And another thing is that the greater the prestige of the supervisor and the greater influence can export or change, exert or change. Meaning that if you have good leader, if you are good leaders, and you can have a better influence on people, right? So that's why so that is one of the things that you can get information, and maybe that one goes for this one, and it's kind of a slice, it's kind of a slide, it's kind of a different thing, and then if you have more specific information provided, and then people's kind of attitude is kind of resistance is reduced. So give them more specific information though, but it's really relevant and meaningful information to them, and then you could have a more opportunity to change with less resistance. And if you so a lot of people is kind of back to kind of presented right in appropriate ways, and the people understand what's going on, and then they can see the planning and what's the data gathering and analysis and interpretations, and then it's easy to make a process. So you're gonna see the whole process and visually and well presented, and then you can maybe there is give them kind of a reason and then logics. And maybe from the inside, changing from the inside, it's less resistant to from the outside than the outside, and then maybe create, because you gotta watch the whole process, and maybe you may be part of the organization. That's why it's easy to understand one another. That's why it's easier. And so provide information the whole process, and then how can you plan, and then what's the consequences, and then if you project it to the people who really was involved in, and then relevant to people, and then maybe it's easier to change. So that is the hugest kind of how can we reduce the information. That one is kind of I mess up the PowerPoint order, and then that's why it's all connected. And London, he had more little bit different way there. How can we reduce the resistance? And then first of all, he said evaluate the characteristic of change. And why do you want to change? What is the problem? And then why would you want to change? And then, so consider the complexity. It's not an easy process, and then whole process, and then what factors are influence on the changes, and what is the outcomes, and then and psychological, and then financial cost, and then the extent of which the purpose and intended outcomes are, and then there's the extent purpose and extent outcomes are clear, and the amount of the mutual agreement, all kind of you gotta kind of evaluate relate to the changes, right? Each one of you will be practical though. So it's clear, and then people can follow and follow you, and then the mean that follow, right? And then that's resistant. And consider who and what is affected by the work that is done, and then the working and personal relationship of those affected, and then so how it's gonna affect people. Think about people who are already involved into the programs and systems, and then they are already affected. So always you gotta consider, right? But think about when you consider, and then always what is more benefit for them. There is more issues, and then if you have tried to get a more benefit for the people who are already involved, and then they're willing to take it, right? And what about the envision how the change will be implemented? And you got to process and envision, they can see that how the changes are implemented, and then what is coming, or what is the outcome they can envision. And reduce, if you do that, and then you maybe reduce the uncertainty of uncertainty to minimum, and then try to prepare for the multiple innovations, and then mean that there is a process to change, and what if it doesn't work, and then maybe you could have another way that we can cover this one, and we can do it. Like a lot of innovation is there, and then sometimes it doesn't work maybe this way, and a lot of alternatives in each state, right? And then so you think this is the best, and then, but it doesn't work, and then how can you cover it, and you can another alternatives there, and then you can adjust, right? That is multiple innovations, and then maybe accountability is there, responsibility is there, and then it's easier to process, right? And that's why how can we work with the people with less resistance to change? That is the ideas. Think about how can we make effective educational changes. How can we change it? I already said that there's a lot of the administrator has a lot of make a lot of decisions in their work, right? And still, I don't know how much we can change it and through the decision, by the decision, but still there's a change. How to make it effective? Maybe you can have some program at school, after school programs there, maybe some PE class programs there, and then maybe you need to change how can we do that effectively. Personally, I think organizational leadership is already important. Yeah, it's a really big key. So what kind of leadership style does the administrator have? And another one is you gotta know the organization cultures. You gotta know the school cultures, how they run schools, and maybe previously under previous leadership and how they work together. What was the outcome? But if you you consider a lot of problem on the programs and then system, and then maybe we can change in this way, and then maybe we can have a better outcome. It's really beneficial for students, beneficial for the teachers, and then how can we process? But there is a school, people are really staying long and old, and they don't want to change, and then it's hard to work with them, and then how can you motivate, how can you buy their kind of a heart to change? Organization culture is really important, and then maybe you can kind of nurture and some new culture in schools, people you change. Just remember the rise of types of change and really informs the change, and maybe I don't know how effective when you implement the programs. So depends on the context, but still leadership style is really important, and then who have really understand the schools and understand the peoples and understand the students, especially in educational changes, right? And just think about it. This is the last class of the educational leadership and administrations, and it's really, if you want to have a better education, if you want to have something new, and then was along in the society changes, and then you really need to change, keep changing, right? To equip the students, to provide new skills and all like that. Which one is effective? And I want to share about the professional standard of education leaders standard. It's by National Policy Board for Educational Administration. There is a 10 characteristic standard for educational leaders. And there is first one is standard one is leaders supposed to should have missions, visions, and core values. As an educator, always think about when you go to school, what is the vision, what is the missions, what is the core values. And another standard is ethics and professional norms. If we don't have ethics, and then it's hard to get the kind of credit from the student and credit from the teachers. And it's hard to raise raise the values that society needs if you don't have any morality or ethics, right? At least you gotta know the professional norms. That is another standard. And visions and philosophy. First part is philosophy, and second one is ethics. And equity, and then cultural responsiveness. These are really big issues nowadays. How can you pursue justice and equality? How can we respond to the cultural difference? There's another thing that we gotta know, and curriculum and instruction and assessment. We gotta know basic idea about curriculums, and then based on the vision and the missions and core values, and how can you provide all the educations, instruction, how can you deliver all things to the teachers, and what is the assessment, evaluation. And also, community of care and support for students. How can you do that? School can be a community provide cares and support for students. What about professional capacity of the school personnel? How can you hire the right people, and who is really have the same visions and missions and core values and work together for students? That's also really professional capacity. It's important. When you go to organization, and then what kind of people organization hire? They know who need, what kind of person they need, exact same. Then we should take away the nepotism, and then it's just, if you can see then a lot of nepotism, and religious, and then other and social organizations, and but especially in underdeveloping countries, but that one is one of the standard, the professional capacity school personnel, which person you need to hire and work with. Professional community for the teachers and staff. What's a community for students, community for the teachers? How can you make community with the staff and teachers? That's another abilities. And then meaningful engagement with the families and community outside of school, and parents and the community. How can you communicate with them? How can you work with them for the schools? And operation and management. Okay, that's why we are taking this class. And what kind of things you should consider operate the school, and how can you manage management skill, and school improvement. How can you improve the school? That is professional standard for the educational leaders standard. You gotta keep that in mind, and then I don't know how much you kind of have your own understanding of this area, and then you're ready for this area, and then you can go to school as a leader. That's why I think leader is really important. That's why I try to find this information and share with you guys, right? And just think about it and how important it is. So a lot of the topic that we already talk about here, and then like sometimes we don't have a topic, but we touch a little by little, like credibilities, ethics, and curriculums, and then right, and all kind of stuff, and then changes, and then it's not just one. Education is kind of just think about huge, not organization, but usually as an administrator, you go to school, and then there is a school is here, and then depends on the size of the school, and there is a school is here, and then you have a district here, and then our state here, supervision and the federal. How can you work out, right? There is what is that? Leadership, and then not you cannot be ready properly, but at least you gotta think about it. You will have the idea to jump into becoming a leader at schools. And this is the last class for the educational leadership and administration. So that is it's not my area, but still I learned a lot, and it's a lot of communication with the organizations because we sort of school as an organization, and then I hope that you guys had interesting and kind of insightful journey with me for this class, and then maybe if you have more interested, and then maybe you can see the readable, more books, and then you know that, and that this book is really gives a theoretical foundation. I know this is an old version, but new versions came out, and I use this one because it's cheaper. And then another book is that I already introduced in the class, and then that gives a practical idea, and then you need theory and practicality is kind of you gotta balance and then see it. And I hope that there's a lot of books out there, and then you can see nowadays and currently issued printed books and published books, and then and you can see you can read the book and publish your resume, and then maybe you can get a more idea, and then still you gotta know that how the theory is developed, and then sometimes if you know the theories, and that's why I try to show them theories and models, and then there's a foundation and frame. And without foundation, without frame, and then you can make your own things, but sometimes maybe you could make more try and errors. So that's my approach. Okay, thank you for being with me, and then I hope that you guys have a very successful year this 2003, and